Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Women in Analytics webinar. We are excited to be hosting the second episode of our Data as a Product Demystification series. We have Kim with us today, who is great. We're really excited to be chatting about this topic. To provide some background on our first webinar, we did a poll actually to see what folks were interested in hearing about the most, and the human element is one of the, or was one of the top rated items in that poll. So we are incredibly excited to be bringing that presentation to you today. If this is your first Women in Analytics webinar, we have a couple of things that we'll get through in terms of just logistics and whatnot, and then we'll get right into the good stuff. And today we'll spend just the first few minutes talking about Women in Analytics, also our webinar series sponsor, Pathfinder Product. We'll get right into the presentation. And then along the way, if you have any questions for Kim, please throw those in the Q&A. We plan to get to all of those at the end during those last few minutes. And then the Data as a Product Demystification series, again, we partnered with Pathfinder on this. We've done a lot of work with them over the last couple of months around data as a product. So we're really excited to be expanding upon that. I'm going to read just kind of the first part of this verbatim. So the concept of treating data as a product has become not just a strategic advantage, but a necessity. Throughout this entire series, we'll uncover the fundamental principles and explore how organizations can leverage this innovative paradigm to unlock the true potential of their data assets. So last time we talked a little bit about the kind of basics of data as a product. Today, we're going to talk about the human element. And then we have another webinar in 2 weeks on Wednesday at noon Eastern that will dive into a little bit more of a fireside chat style where we'll get some opinions and kind of background from different folks on different parts of the data as a product pipeline. And then Women in Analytics, if this is your first event with us, I would love to share a little bit about our organization as well. The mission of Women in Analytics is really to just increase visibility to diverse individuals making an impact in the space. We do this a couple of different ways, webinars being one of them. We also do an annual conference here in Columbus, Ohio. We also are hosting a Portland event this year as well, which we are incredibly excited about. So lots of ways in which we are trying to achieve that goal. If you are interested in staying in the loop on some of the events that we have coming up, this QR code will take you right to our community platform. And then throughout the webinar, if you're running into any audio issues, you can shoot us an email. I'll be monitoring that throughout the conversation. Again, if you have a question for Kim along the way, please put those in the Q&A. We'll be sure to get to all of those at the end. And then again, if you're interested in joining us for future sessions, we have another one in 2 weeks. You can follow us on socials, join our newsletter, or tune in on the community platform mentioned in the last slide. And then lastly, I do want to thank our sponsor for this series, Pathfinder Product. They are a product-led business consulting organization based here in Columbus, Ohio. They offer a variety of services, including product consulting, product transformation services, recruitment assistance, and a lot more for helping organizations set product direction. They recently, I know Jen announced last week that they've just recently become a part of a premier software consulting agency, Test Double, and that really is an effort to just kind of offer complete consulting services across the entire product lifestyle. So thank you to Pathfinder for supporting the series, and thank you to Jen for introducing us to Kim, who's going to be presenting today. So thanks so much, Kim, for joining us. That's all I had on my end, and I'm excited to turn it over to you, the reason we're all here. So thank you for participating.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey. I really appreciate it. And hello to everyone online. Let's see if I can get us up and going with the share here. And Kelsey, I may ask you just to make sure that the screen is showing. Are we good?
Yep, looks good to me. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So welcome. Thank you for joining today for the human element. We're going to talk about people and process and data initiatives, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with it since we're right before a Thanksgiving holiday for those that are in the US. So let's jump right in. Sorry, technical difficulty. Here we go. So some interesting research has come out over the last couple of weeks. I have a friend who works for Capital One, and they partnered with Forrester to do some research on decision-making in the line of business and how they felt they were ready for data and any data-driven change versus what the data role responded to that. So those of us who eat, breathe, live data every day had a much lower view of how to implement change and transformation in the data space in a timely manner. Then, you look at another statistic that's come out, and this is from the Data Science Process Alliance, and they talk a lot about the big data failures and what's going wrong. And look at those top three things. What is it? It's about humans. And I think we've been missing a lot of the conversation as we've gone along for this data journey on how we think about the changes that have to take place from an organizational standpoint. In the past, data was kind of seen as like a second-class citizen. It was a product of processes, of systems doing their jobs, and then we'd gather that data and we'd talk about it, but we didn't really think of it as a product. And this major shift that's happening as we become data-driven cultures, as we look for ways to really take our data and leverage it for AI, for ML, for advanced models and predictions, as we're going through this change, we've forgotten a little bit the human element. And so I'm here today to share with you some of the successes, but mainly some of the failures that I've had in this space over the last few years. So a little introduction to me. My name is Kim Theis. I have been a part of working in data and technology for the last 20 or so years. I've worked both on the consulting side of the house, and I've also been on the enterprise and the delivery side as well. So I've had the unique experience of being able to see from both lenses what's gone well and what hasn't in data projects, and happy to share what I've learned today. So I got a little bit of notoriety from this article that I recently published called talking about data mesh and how it's dead. And it was like instant notoriety, sorry, because there were some people that immediately reached out and said, this isn't even a technical article, why are you publishing it? And then I had this huge mass of people that reached out and said, me too, it failed. And why did it fail? And so those of you that may not be familiar with data mesh or the concept, it's really thinking about data as products, organizing it in a way that it's easily accessible for self-service, creating some federated governance, meaning simplified governance that can apply across all data sets, and really upping our game in governance. And a lot of people have gone on this path trying to implement it. Very few have succeeded over time. There's a big secret in all of that is we spend a lot of time planning for data projects, but we don't spend a lot of time really talking about the human implications. And I'm here to argue that I think that the human piece is probably more important than even the technologies that we're choosing to use. So when we look at the data science hierarchy of needs, I've got the source here and I'm happy to share the deck after this conversation. When we look at that hierarchy of needs, you'll notice that really all of these green and bolded areas are about humans and about change management. And we've forgotten that in the project management side of things. Traditionally, data had been done a little bit more of a waterfall method. You've got to first, put together the pipelines, and then you've got to clean it. And then, that the old way of thinking about ETL, which is now moving to ELT, the old way of thinking. What we're finding though is in that process of putting that technology in place, there's a huge and massive shift that has to happen to your culture for it to stick, especially on the governance side of the house. You need business context. You need people who are going to own the data. And a lot of times we're still doing it manually through, these big processes that people have to keep up with and they forget about it. But more than anything, it's got to start from the top down. And we need to be talking to our executives about why the data is important and why it's such a tremendous asset to our organization if organized correctly. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today going through a fun exercise, if my slides will change here, around superheroes, and that we need to be able to ensure data success and to put this as a human first effort, not just a technology effort. We'll talk a little bit about vision and change agency, roadblock elimination, willingness to experiment in silo slaying. None of these are new concepts, but a lot of times we're finding that they're not being applied in data today. So let's get started. Let's talk about defining value for a little bit. This is a first part of when we go in and we start any project, especially a data project, it's about the value. Many times we're given the task of, hey, bring on a new data set from an external source, or give me an output of a dashboard that will give me new insights. But a lot of times we aren't talking about what is the value of the data itself that you're bringing over. In order to really begin, oh, I have a fun animation here. So in order to really begin to understand it, you're going to need a visionary. The visionary might be you, or it might be somebody else in the organization. But this is a person who can jump through dimensions. She can help to define value, gain buy-in, and she's probably at an executive level. Her nemesis is going to be lack of leadership, buy-in, and support. And so she knows how to drive from the top and create a compelling vision for executives to buy into. In my case, I went through this at a fintech company and had a brilliant visionary on our team who really helped other executives understand the value of the project that we were getting ready to deliver. In this case, it was a risk-based project where we were trying to bring together financial data, risk data, customer data, and get a full view of total profitability for customers. Because of this person being a visionary, he really helped to break down walls and barriers early on, and get other executives bought in to the vision so that we could deliver massive transformational change. So some of the vision around a data-driven culture, it's really understanding that data has business meaning and focusing on the business meaning rather than just how you get to the data. It's thinking about data as a product, really thinking about the value that is being delivered and how you measure that value, setting KPIs up front to ensure that we're able to measure as we go and adjust if we aren't getting the value that's expected. It's also about creating usable, reusable, and interoperable data, meaning we aren't solving for just one problem and one point of time. There are many other people that may need the same customer data set, or maybe they need the same financial data set, right? So let's be very clear in how we can put this together as products that are reusable, and that those reusable products can interact with one another. And then finally, that data can be trusted through governance and security. And so governance and security are the things that we probably like to talk about the least, but are most important in bringing about a data-driven culture. Because if you don't invest in the guardrails and in the framework to ensure that your data is going to have quality and consistency throughout the delivery lifecycle, you will fail over time. You may have a short-term win, but it's not going to stick. So when we think about the visionary and this particular superhero, what are the skill sets that we really look for in that person, whether it's ourselves or somebody else in the organization? The first one is precognition. I really have emotional intelligence to be able to understand what the other executives or other stakeholders that they need buy-in from are going to need, and how to have that conversation with them. There's this other word, and in coming up with superheroes, I found this word, I loved it. Xenoglossy. So it's the ability to speak, to write, to understand a foreign language that you otherwise wouldn't normally be able to speak. You haven't been taught it, but you just have this ability when you're around other people to be able to speak their language. And the visionary is going to be able to do that. In my example, at the fintech company, this particular visionary knew how to speak the language. Even though he was in risk, he knew how to speak the language of finance. He knew how to speak the language of product, and he knew how to really work with marketing folks to help them understand the overall benefit to our data project that we were going to deliver. Strategic risk taking. So they know when to hold them and when to fold them. Little Kenny Rogers nod there, but they really are able to take risk and not be afraid to do it and lead their team on new journeys. And they're brave and bold. So when things aren't working as planned, they're able to, from a visionary standpoint, say, okay, here's where the vision was. We're over here. Let's go ahead and have that discussion. It's not an easy one to have, and let's make a decision on where we're going next so that we still have clarity of vision when things get muddy, because it will get muddy over time. But in order to really build momentum, you're going to need some other skill sets, and you're going to need to think about other ways to bring about that data-driven culture, and that's around gaining buy-in. And so to gain buy-in, one of the the superheroes I like to use is an agent of change. And so agent change here is her nemesis is resistance to change and fear. And then one of the cases that I've had to deal with, data engineering really was absolutely against a concept of data mesh. And you may ask why. Well, they're worried about their jobs. They're worried about jobs becoming obsolete. There was, in this one organization that I worked with, a need to control what you knew and to be the expert in it. And if you shared it, it actually gave you a little bit of insecurity in that, hey, maybe my job doesn't have the same value as everyone thinks it does because they have to come to me for this data versus being able to access it on their own. So agent change is all about thinking about the different players and how to motivate them to be able to influence and lead change. So some qualities that she's going to have is superhuman flexibility, thinking about non-traditional ways for a business to grow, thinking about ways to exploit opportunities, tapping into the creativity of others to bring together a team that's going to be excited and understand the change that's about to take place. The other one is belief inducing. So ability to persuade others. This one's probably the most important because there's going to be times through this entire journey of moving towards a data-driven environment where you're going to lose people, they're going to lack faith. And she's really going to be there to help provide context, to give inputs. These are data elements, but this is what it means from a business perspective. And let's understand how we're going to get to the predictions. More than anything, she's going to understand people and see, okay, from a supernatural hearing standpoint, to hear and to see, okay, so-and-so is falling behind. I need to bring another person up to speed. The team overall is feeling down about this process, or maybe this technology isn't what we thought. And she raises those, she helps to influence change, and she helps to bring the naysayers in just enough to be able to continue to deliver. In my case, I had this amazing woman named Yenny that was on our team that really served in this capacity. She was longstanding within the organization, well-respected, didn't have a position of high influence, yet everyone knew her and loved her. And she could come to me and say, hey, Kim, the team over here is having a problem with this, or another team is struggling here. And how can we bring them together? And make sure that they understand what's happening. Another thing that she was really great at was being inspiring and inclusive. And by that, I mean, she was always doing communications. She would often share and just spend time getting to know the team. But what we got in return was immeasurable. And we're talking about a data-driven project, right? I know that I'm going a little bit off the side on the emotional intelligence aspect of this, but sometimes we forget as we're doing these technical projects, it's important to communicate, to make sure we know each other, and to bring that inclusivity to the team so that we can all move forward. Another superhero to bring to the table. So this is Dr. Neophile. Her nemesis is fear of failure and the lack of data literacy and skills. She takes ample time to experiment. She is very interested in data infrastructure and technology. She's also able to articulate that to a larger audience to bring the science to life. So she's got a lot of common challenges that we all face in this space. One is the low tolerance for failure. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I've been on many a team where executives don't want to hear about the failure, or they, hey, just tell us how we can get it done, or give us reasons to be excited. They also only want to hear about wins. What are you doing to move things forward? What's the counter to that? It's not to celebrate failure. Nobody wants to fail, but it's to embrace failure and look for the opportunities for learning in it, and having those discussions with the team and bringing those learnings back to life through new iterations of the testing. Another big area that she's going to have to fight and struggle through with is on this thing that we hear all the time. Our data is proprietary. We need to protect it. There's so many different things we can't do. Data governance can be your best friend. I happen to be in data governance quite a bit of my career, so I get it. We can also be the absolute worst enemy, because our number one job is protecting the data, but The question is, how much data really needs to be protected, on what level, and what data can we bring to light in new and interesting ways internally? So Dr. Neophile is really great at being able to explain the value of the data from a scientific aspect, but also in bringing new data sets or new technologies together so that we can see data that we otherwise had kept hidden in a new light to give insights. The last point that I wanted to raise here is really around moving from insights to decisions. And so in this case, we really need, coming back to that experimentation mentality, we really need that mentality so that we can make better decisions in the future and have more insights. If we aren't willing to test and fail, we aren't going to be able to make decisions. And Dr. Neophile, in this case, is the person who will help make those decisions. Okay, this failed. Let's try this next. So the way that Dr. Neophile addresses a lot of this is through taking the time to solve and following a scientific process in doing that. Setting time boxes, setting guardrails for her team to be able to experiment, taking a look at the wins and failures, making sure that they happen quickly, bringing them back in for learning and succeeding. Through all of this, this is actually how we build trust in our data, and we can get to better AI and ML models over time. So a few of the leadership qualities of this experimentation expert, excuse me. She's got a supernatural adaptability. She's able to go into any situation where there's been a test, be able to create a hypothesis for a problem that needs to be solved, and pivots really quickly when it doesn't work out as planned. I can think of one person from my past who, or actually still in my present, who I work with quite frequently, who really has this trait. Okay, let's test this. Let's try it. I'm sure this is going to be the answer. And then we get in and test and try it. And it's like, oh, you know what? I was wrong. That wasn't the answer. Let's pivot and let's try this next. Having that humility and the lack of ego to be able to change, but also taking that scientific approach in trying new things and not being afraid to fail has really been his greatest strength, I think, over time. Perturbationist. So perturbationist really implies that there's fearless innovation in rapid and iterative ways, being able to lower cost, being able to do smaller chunks of work, but assigning ROI to them. So what is the smallest piece that we can do in a really quick implementation to be able to prove out whether this is a pass or a fail, and then pivot if it, depending on the outputs. That product thinking type of approach is really important here as well, because this person is a teacher above and beyond anything else. So as they learn, they share what's being learned with others. And then finally, in teaching others, habit building as well with the team. So thinking about ways that we can continue to build, but also continue the habit of always testing, always sharing results, whether they're a success or a failure, and feeding that back in. I do find that this persona generally does have almost genius level intellect. They're thinking above and faster than other people. They've already come to conclusions before others have, but they're testing their conclusions through the results and then making the changes versus just following gut. So even with these superheroes, we're still going to have problems persist. And if we had a way of, I know we've got chat going, but maybe think of a few ways within your team that you have villains. So I'll name a few villains that might pop up, like maybe lack of acceptance or indifference, resistance to change, too much, too fast. I don't know. These particular villains for our conversation today are the egomaniac or the exaggerator, burnout, who I chose to be the redhead in the middle, the scope creep, who's off to the left here. These are all people that, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say people. These are either situations or villains that we run into in all of our data-driven initiatives. There's a lot that we can do, and we also need to bring in some additional superheroes to be able to help. So let's see who those are. The roadblock abolisher. So the roadblock abolisher is all about data quality and accessibility issues. She wants to remove roadblocks so that more people can access data, for the correct use. And she wants to improve data quality overall. In order to do that, she is going through, and it's funny, you can tell I use AI, by the way, on this one, because her guns are well below her hands. So all of these were AI generated. But anyway, the roadblock abolisher is going to use her X-ray vision to be able to quickly identify the root cause and the underlying issue. She's going to use vector manipulation to be able to change direction quickly across a spectrum of problems that are both practical and theoretical. And she's going to eliminate obstacles from a system and data standpoint, from data discovery standpoint, any other obstacle that might be faced. And some of those, again, come back to human obstacles too, right? Do we have the right time? Do we have the right talent? And how do we get it? Often she's in a mid-level to senior level position where there's still an ability to influence, to get to the visionary, to get to others on the team, to be able to manipulate the path forward. So when it seems that all is going to fail, you're up against a brick wall, the roadblock abolisher is able to break through that wall and find new ways around it. Also, she's a master of manipulation, not manipulation, I'm sorry, wow, master of negotiation, which I guess could be construed as manipulation in the wrong pretext, but she has the power and reputation to be able to find win-win solutions for everyone. The truth of the matter is there are going to be some people that just don't buy into this data-driven journey, or don't buy into specific aspects or spend or whatever else that you may be trying to really make changes with. And so her job is going to be to bring those parties to the table, to negotiate and find ways forward for the entire team and for the organization to be able to move forward. The last superhero that I'd like to introduce you to is the orchestrator. So her common nemesis, is data silos. And I loved that the AI came up with the silos being like taking off in the background for this one. She really can't stand data segregation. She wants to see all the data together. And so she spends a lot of time using her power to create cross-functional insights and accurate predictions, building out a team. And, a little aside on this, I know we're talking a lot about superheroes, but the thing about superheroes, especially if you think about Marvel and the way Stan Lee did his comics, it's all about the human qualities that we all possess, that we all have failures, that we all have little flaws, yet we also have super strengths. And so the orchestrator is one of those great examples of someone who is completely human, but knows how to break through the silos of different departments, of different of different lines of business to be able to make change. She's a leader of the masses, so she's building out multiple teams across different departments, helping to upskill and bring people together. She's an intuitive strength finder in terms of, finding the right talent to be able to work across some insights. An example that I'll give from my past of an orchestrator is working with multiple lines of business. And I'll go back to the fintech story where we were working in risk and we needed to work with finance, with product, and a number of other teams. They all had different people doing different data and analytics for different executives that needed different views of the same problems. And so what this orchestrator was able to do on my team was to identify who those people were that were pulling the insights, that were bringing together the new ways of thinking, or that were solving for common problems, and bring them together so that we could have conversations and understand where our challenges were, but also where our synergies were. So intuitive strength finder in terms of finding the right people, but also finding the right capabilities to bring together. Multi-capitalist. So I really worked on expanding my vocabulary for this presentation. A multi-capitalist is someone who has fluency with working and getting the most from a lot of different capitals. So a capital might be natural, it might be intellectual, it might be financial or social. They really know how to leverage all of those pieces and parts to be able to break down the silos and have the conversation. So an example might be the finance team might be really concerned about results for P&L and ensuring accuracy of those results, whereas a risk organization might be concerned about losses. Losses are a line item for the profit and loss for finance, but risk isn't really included as an overall view of whether a product is successful or not. That's an example of using a couple of types of capital: intellectual, using the understanding of risk and losses, but also financial. Well, how does it have an impact on the bottom line and the decision making that we need to have? Finally, superhuman ability to get shit done. So this is the person who knows how to motivate and to move people. This is why she's leading masses. She's able to articulate the needs, the values, and the changes that need to take place in order to deliver on a data-driven culture. So with this team, we go back and we fight the villains, and now we've got enough at hand, zap, pow, boom, to be able to put them behind bars. It's the right planning, it's the right team, it's the right mindsets, and it's the right technologies and approach to data. And this is the conversation that I think that we need to begin to have overall as a larger community here in the data space. We spend a lot of time talking about analytic tools. We spend a lot of time talking about AI. Oh my gosh, I've attended so many meetings this year and it's all about AI, right? But in order to ensure transformation is truly a success, we have to put people first and in the center of the conversation. By putting people first and central, we'll also be able to have a better understanding of the business problems that are at hand and what we're really trying to solve for. We'll be able to have greater impact, and we'll be able to have better return on investment in shorter amount of time. So it's going to be up to us as humans to be able to get this done, to be able to really lead radical change that sticks. Throughout our life cycle, from defining value to gaining buy-in to actually embedding and adopting, we've got to bring multiple strengths and talents to the table. And I know I spent a lot of time playing with superheroes today and AI to illustrate it. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to having a very clear and compelling vision of what your data-driven culture is going to be like. We use that word all the time, but what does it really mean? What does it look like for your organization? My organization may look very different than yours. And so it's not clear to the entire team what the vision is unless you set it out in a very compelling manner that's easy to understand, regardless of your role in the organization. Next was around change agency, and our cheerleader here is all about culture and buy-in. But the truth of the matter is, in many of these data mesh instances, and I was at Big Data London this year, and this was the hot topic. I asked a lot of people, what went well or what went wrong? The number one thing that went wrong is people just didn't believe or adopt the new technologies that were coming in. And so there needs to be more time that's spent upfront gaining the cultural buy-in and spending time educating around the benefits to the entire organization, not just to the data team or to a technology team, but how it's going to benefit and drive the organization forward. And the importance of data governance and controls, and why it's so important to buy into those as well. People don't like to do that, right? It's not a fun job. At the same time, there are new ways of working. There's new technologies, there's data contracts, there's other ways of automating this so that we can make it easier. But at the end of the day, we've got to gain that buy-in through communication and clarity on how we're going to achieve it. The fearless roadblock eliminator is really vital here in terms of getting through the roadblocks that you are going to face. We all face them as we're going through this massive change, especially as we're talking about data as a product. And I know that this series is really focused on that product thinking. That product thinking is not always an easy conversation. It's hard to articulate in the data space. And you're going to need someone who can knock down doors and give you the opportunities to do that. At the same time, you're going to need to adjust your language to the business needs as well to be able to explain why it's important. Finally, willingness to experiment and fail with our Dr. Nia file. So really important to acknowledge that there are going to be failures. One of the things that I'm finding from a consulting aspect with AI is people want immediate answers and they want to know, hey, this is going to work for me, or it's not, and I'm not going to go down this path. That answer is wrong. You're going to have to experiment a lot. You're going to have a lot of failures in order to have that one success. And so being able to experiment, to not necessarily celebrate, but to embrace the failures and to learn from them very quickly and to iterate is really important. I think the other piece here that's really important is really breaking down to a minimum ROI. One of the things I often ask my clients as we're having discussions around how to get started is, what is the one thing that if you knew as an organization really could make a difference? What are the data elements that you can put together that you've not seen before in your organization that are going to drive the most change? Keep it very narrow, find where the maximum value is, and work on that business case first, small and iterative at a time. Another thing I got out of the Big Data London conference was that many people went for kind of a bigger bang when looking at data mesh, data fabric, or these data product driven type of results. And so for those that went with the big bang, they weren't able to articulate the value of what they were delivering. In other cases, a lot of people have really struggled to gain even the initial buy-in towards any data-driven culture because their company has spent so much time and money on massive data storage solutions that they don't even want to think about how to get the data out with an additional financial investment. Come back again to what's the minimum viable product, right? That's what we learn in software early on. What can we ship? What can we deliver that will give the most value and the most impact to our business as early as possible? And then finally, the orchestrator. From her, we learned that collaboration is really key in getting this done. You're going to need to work across a variety of different teams and break down silos, not only of the data space, but of the people side of things too. Many times, and especially large organizations, you've been working within one silo so long, you may not even speak the language of another silo. And so you're really going to need that person to be able to orchestrate straight across them. That person also should be able to drive on getting stuff done. Like, how can we move more efficiently as a team? How can we move effectively as a team? Often we throw around the term project manager as or a scrum master as, oh, that's just someone we need on the team. It's actually someone that's really, really important. And if they are truly an orchestrator, you're going to have tremendous value in the delivery that you bring about. So it's up to you. You're a human, right? I'm a human too. We're all going to have failures. I know today's discussion wasn't so much on the technology aspects of a data-driven culture, more on the people. And thanks for humoring me and letting me use superheroes to define those superpowers we need to bring to the table. I hope to continue the discussion with all of you. And so I'd love to open it up for questions and answers if we have any.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kim. This presentation was by far my favorite that I've seen so far. So I love the creative structure. I love the personas you put together. I love the imaging, and also very timely with the new Marvels movie too. So I really appreciate all the effort you put into this. It was phenomenal. We do have a couple of questions that have come in already. So I'll start working through those. And then as I am, if folks have additional questions that they're interested in asking, please put those in the Q&A and we will work to get to those. So the first one is, for 3 years running, new venture partners survey of CDOs found 50% of data projects failed due to culture. Why are there not people who own data culture, and why has the data enablement title fallen out of favor?
Ooh, good one. That's a great question. I think it's hard to attach value to that role. Unfortunately, when you think about hiring, you're asking to hire, and let's call it the cheerleader, right? You're asking to hire the cheerleader, or someone that's really going to be a culture champion. I think many enterprises have been burned through many years of long implementations of data governance structures where they see this role to be much more, hey, I'm going to tell you how to bring this together. It's going to be a process. It's going to be this big lift, that they don't see the need for data evangelism. I think that changes. And, perhaps we need to have some new terminology around who that person is and what their role is. but I do think it varies from organization to organization. If you're in a smaller company, maybe you don't have that one single individual. In a larger company, it may be incumbent in part of another job, whether it's, within the data governance spectrum, or maybe it's even in data engineering. But I wish I had a really good answer for why it's fallen out of favor, other than I can only assume, and again, that's an assumption, so take it for what it is, that tying ROI to that role is probably really difficult to do from a hiring perspective.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Great. We've got 2 questions from Liliana as well. Do you think the data visionary role will be a data product manager role that a lot of companies are creating now?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think, that role can exist on a number of different levels, but overall, from a data vision standpoint, that is the job of a product owner, right? Is to be able to say, here's what this looks like over time, here's how we're going to get there, and here's what the roadmap is. So I'd say yes, and absolutely. And, in looking for a product owner or a product manager in the data space, that is one of the key skill sets I would look for. Are you able to articulate that vision? Are you able to create a compelling message? And can you break down the work in a logical way for the business to be able to understand the value they're going to get from it? So absolutely. Good call out, Liliana.
Great. And then the last question that we have, which we've got about a minute left, so this is probably all we have time for, unfortunately. Do you have any recommendations for cases to look for data projects that were successful in mentioning data as a product? Liliana is looking to try to help her organization with bringing up ways to help data projects.
Yeah. There are a number of companies that have had quite a bit of success in this area. HelloFresh is one that comes to mind right off the top of my head. That's an interesting case study that has published quite a bit out there. I know Capital One has published quite a bit in this area. I would look to some of the larger Fortune 500 companies that have the capability to do external blogs or to share some of their knowledge. In my previous life at PayPal, we published quite a bit about some of our successes there as well. So yeah, those are a few ideas to get the ball rolling.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kim. This was incredible. I am thrilled that we were able to bring this topic and to have you join us to present this topic. It was great. So I appreciate your time. It is already 12:45, which is crazy. I feel like this 45-minute time frame goes by so quickly every time. So yes, I appreciate it. Everyone enjoy their holiday weekend, and we will see you in 2 weeks for the next one.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Happy Thanksgiving,
Thanks, everyone.